What am I reading? I'm reading the stories on the House of Representatives signing a letter protesting the president's policies on Bosnia.
And of all the things, when you pick up the papers this morning, why did this get your attention?
Well, on the Washington Times, it gets your attention because you have this picture of a flag being stepped upon, and then it says 184 congressmen urge president to cancel mission. Then in the New York Times, which buried it in the middle, but they say it was 201 members, including 15 Democrats, had signed the letter which said simply, "We urge you, Mr. Clinton, not to send ground troops to Bosnia."
Christopher Hitchens, you came into this room saying you saw the same thing, the same photo.
I was interested in the same photograph because I was wondering if the Washington Times hadn't violated the provisions of the flag-burning amendment that I think it otherwise editorially favors. There's an outright desecration right on the front page of our local conservative. Right. I certainly hope that when the amendment passes, it won't be lawful to show pictures of the American flag being blasphemed in that way.
They can put it in air quotes, can't they? And these are foreigners. These are dirty foreigners.
They can put ironic, but I also notice, as Richard, I think, did, that in one of the pictures of the desecration, you can see somebody wearing a Redskins hat.
That's the Washington Post, page 1 of the Post.
Infuriated Serb. No, it's not on the front of the Post. I think it's the Times one. Some infuriated Serb.
Where is it in the Times?
Trashing Old Glory and wearing
Washington
a Redskins cap.
Washington Post, there it is.
Let's show the audience.
Can we get that up?
But this is not a color photograph. Doesn't have the same impact, does it?
No.
And this is on the front page of the Washington Post. A Bosnian Serb soldier holds up a torn American flag during a demonstration by several thousand Serb residents. Where's the Redskin? Oh, it's right here.
Right. There it is.
How about that?
What does that mean?
What does it mean? Well, it's an interesting choice of hometown reporting as well, because the Washington Times has missed the possibility of...
well, he must have been the guy who photographed the other picture for the Washington Times, presumably.
Before we move on, let me ask the two of you, what is, if you're a conservative or if you're a liberal, what's the position you're going to take in a situation like this, Bosnian, the whole issue? And
it doesn't split on conservative-liberal, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I wish that the international community had intervened a long time before now in Bosnia, and I found that on the whole, people on the left, which is where I start from, were not as keen as I was. And there were some very bizarre people on the right who were making the, or I think bizarre, who were sort of making the running, actually, principally Baroness Thatcher, who was saying, look, there's no reason at all to let the Serbs keep on doing this, and it's a disgrace and it ought to be stopped.
So you're for intervening?
Well, I'm not very strongly in favour of the Dayton Agreement, which I think is a bit of a sellout. I mean, I think the Bosnian presidency is right in saying that it is not justice, but it is perhaps peace, and peace is better than nothing.
Mr. Brookhiser, where are you?
Well, National Review has been calling for years that the Muslims be trained, that they be allowed to arm themselves, but we don't like the Dayton Agreement. It seems to be putting the United States in the role of enforcing a peace which nobody on the ground really likes. They like it only because they're exhausted or they're temporarily exhausted, and people have lost sight of the notion of a limited national interest. I mean, we have a real national interest in stopping aggression in Europe, but since the Serbs are not animated by any hostile superpower or by any hostile ideology, our interest is a limited one. And if there are people on the ground, as there are, who are willing to fight this, we should help them and let them do it.
Here's the cover of a new book coming out, Founding Father, George Washington Rediscovering. What would he think of this whole move to Bosnia?
Well, look, the book is not, my book is February 22nd, by the way, is when it's coming out. Easy date to remember. And the point of the book is not to say, to look at 200-year-old policy prescriptions and say what he would think now. The point of the book is to ask, why is this man famous?
But it may not be the point, but I want to ask you.
Oh, you want to ask it? Well, what do you think? Well, he was against habitual alliances with foreign powers. He said, if you have an ongoing alliance, you are a slave to that friendliness with another country. which is not pertinent in this case because we don't have any historical alliance or antipathy with any of the sides.
Mr. Hitchens, this book, which you wrote with Mother Teresa on the cover, when I first saw it, I thought it might have been Mother Teresa's book that's out. What would she think of this whole?
She would not be, I think, under that impression. She does have a book out of her own, or at least it's been ghostwritten for her. It's called A Simple Path. I think the only fair thing to recommend is that you go to your nearest fine bookstore and order both of them. But the contrast will be instantly, I think, available to you.
What else are the two of you reading this morning?
We have the Washington Post, page 1, had a story on the vote to ban partial birth abortions in the Senate.
More paper this morning.
Yeah.
It's huge here. Okay, where is
55 to 45. It's A1.
A1. 55, 45. Well, we can't find it. Anyway, why did that get your attention?
Well, it got my attention because this may be the beginning of, or certainly an extension of, rolling back the right to abortion that was established in Roe versus Wade, which appeared to be limited in the Supreme Court's language, but in fact is unlimited in practice. And the Senate took an opportunity to vote against an egregious form of abortion, and I think we will see other restrictions coming out of this Congress. And this puts the pro-abortion side in a box because they don't ever want to talk about the details of abortion.
Yeah, there was a very strong piece there by a woman who'd undergone this procedure in the Times, New York Times op-ed page about a week ago, which must have had a strong effect on me. I mean, she described what happened when your baby has, though it's quite well on, has in fact died inside you. And in her case, she was told it wasn't possible to induce it or remove it by a cesarean section for various reasons that were to do with her own state of health. That this was the only way of ridding herself actually of a fetus that was already dead. And she said also the procedure isn't as scary and horrifying as it somehow has been made out. The very lurid things we've been told about crushing the skull with scissors and so forth aren't true. In fact, the dead child could be handed to her for a leave-taking in reasonable condition before it's taken away. So, I don't know. I mean, I certainly would ask anyone who wants to think seriously and morally about this to look up that piece. You
walked in with this piece on your agenda. Christians against welfare cuts are arrested in the Capitol by Frank Klein's, and a barely noticed counterpoint to the budget battle. 55 evangelical Christian preachers and followers were arrested in the Capitol Rotunda today as they sought to speak up for the poor and confront lawmakers with biblical verses against retreating from society's duty to help the needy. And here's a photograph by Steve Crowley.
Yeah, I'll tell you what struck me about it was the opening sentence. It's on page B15. And the event, which it does describe the arrest of all these clergy in the Rotunda, is described as a barely noticed event, which seems to be a very strong and bizarre way of opening a news story. I mean, that's only true if the reporter says it's true. And I brought along with me from The Nation Ralph Nader's column on media matters in the current Nation, which has the New York Times doing this again. On November 24th, he says, the New York Times published a page-one story by Tamar Lewin that explored why, quote, an odd hush has fallen over Washington, the sound of advocacy groups that have been unable to create much of a clamor against the most drastic cuts in decades. Ralph Nader points out, excuse me, that the reporter, in all modesty, left out a significant explanation for this odd hush, the New York Times itself. I don't think the Times can have read this column because here is one protest against the budget cuts being reported in the Times on page B15 with the intro that the protest it covers was, as it says, barely noticed. So I think it's, I thought it was worthy of note. As being self-confirming, yes.
If a tree falls in the forest and the Times doesn't hear it, does it make a sound?
Looking at the cover of National Review, can you explain this? It says National Review hits 40. Can we get a close-up of this? I see Newt Gingrich and Rush Limbaugh and Fidel Castro.
No, that's Solzhenitsyn.
Oh, huge mistake. Excuse me. That's why I should have kept my mouth shut. Who are the other people? Who's at the piano?
Well, you see to the left of Rush Limbaugh